I've been a K9 handler for almost 9 years. My partner is a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rex. He's trained in tracking and narcotics detection, and he's solid. He doesn't spook easily. I've taken him into warehouses, abandoned houses, woods at night, and he's always steady. That's why what happened that night stuck with me. We were called in to assist patrol on a house search after a foot pursuit in the area. Officers had attempted to stop a male suspect a few blocks away, and he ran. They chased him through backyards and lost sight of him near this property. A side gate to the yard was found open, and the back door of the house was unlocked. Neighbors had also reported hearing a struggle in the backyard, which added to the urgency. Patrol swept the first floor, but weren't comfortable calling it safe. They believed the suspect may have forced his way inside and could still be hiding somewhere in the house. Rex and I arrived about 20 minutes later. The house was a 2-story place in a quiet subdivision. There were no signs of forced entry from the front. The officers on the scene briefed me quickly. Long story short, they told me there were no obvious signs of struggle, just the open access at the rear of the house and the fact that the suspect had vanished within yards of it. I put Rex on a short leash and gave him the search command. He pulled forward immediately, moving from room to room on the first floor. The living room was clear, kitchen was clear, and laundry room was clear. So we moved upstairs. Up there was a narrow hallway with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. There was no fresh air up there and no draft. All the windows seemed to be closed, as to be expected, as the neighbor reported that the owners of this house were not in town. Rex and I went into the first bedroom, then the second bedroom. Then he pulled toward the bathroom at the end of the hall. I examined the little bathroom, and overall it seemed clean. Nothing was out of place in any of the rooms. Rex sniffed around the room, the edge of the vanity, the floor. Then he froze. His ears went forward and his body stiffened up. He started growling, looking outside the bathroom door. His growls then turned to barks. He was staring out into the hallway, growling and barking at something out there. I stepped backwards out of the bathroom with him. "What is it?" I said quietly. Rex was locked onto something down the hallway. At the very end, near the last bedroom door, I saw what he was barking at. This figure standing there. This tall, dark, completely still figure. And it didn't look like any of the officers downstairs. They also would have in some way announced their presence to me. I identified myself as police and that there was a canine with me, but there was no response to this. Then I just flat out asked, "Who is that?" Still no response. Rex was pulling in the opposite direction, something I'd never seen him do before. He didn't want to go down the hall. Then the figure turned and walked into the bedroom at the end of the hall. I knew every officer on scene. I knew where they were positioned. None of them were upstairs with me. Rex planted his feet when I tried to move forward. He pulled backwards. He did not want to go down that hallway. I drew my weapon and said over the radio that I had possibly located the suspect at the end bedroom. "Start making your way up." I pulled Rex forward and he resisted entirely. He kept looking at me like he didn't understand why I was making him go. When we reached the bedroom doorway, he refused to cross with me. I stepped into the room first with my gun raised, but it was empty, like completely empty. Just a bed against the wall and a dresser across from it. I waited for the others to get up there before fully entering the room. And when we finally entered, there was no one standing in there or hiding under the bed. The window was closed, and even the closet was empty. There was no kind of attic hatch or crawlspace door. Rex stayed in the hallway. He wouldn't step foot into the room. I expected the others to doubt me, but they saw Rex and the way he was acting. One of them tried coaxing him into the room. He refused. We searched every inch of that bedroom. We checked the walls for false panels. We checked the bathroom again. We checked the other bedroom. There was not a single trapdoor anywhere. If it weren't for Rex, I feel like I'd have gone crazy. After about 20 minutes, I told the others I had to take Rex out of there. But before we left, he kept glancing back down the hall at that bedroom. As soon as we stepped outside into the night air, he relaxed slightly. When he was in his crate, he curled up immediately, but he didn't look at me the way he usually does after a search. Patrol wrapped up not long after. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times in my head. I think I believe it was a real person, the suspect even. But I don't know how they escaped that room or why Rex behaved that way. Maybe more suspicious people than me will say what Rex and I saw was a ghost. Rex has never reacted like that before or since. He's tracked armed suspects without hesitation and entered a lot more stressful environments than that house. But that room he wouldn't step inside. I trust that dog more than I trust my own instincts. Just about everyone in my department has at least one unexplainable night call. And this one was mine.vv. When I turned 21, I joined the police force in a remote town that I won't name. The department needed new officers, and I was a young father who needed money. So the timing was perfect. Because I was a rookie, they assigned me to the night shift. It ran from 6 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning. I actually didn't mind them. I've always been a night owl. After a year in the department, something happened one night that changed everything. A severe thunderstorm rolled into town and caused major power outages. I parked my cruiser in a parking lot in the middle of town. At 2 a.m., our dispatcher Claire radioed in. She reported that someone who sounded like an adult male claimed to have been kidnapped. They told her they were held captive inside someone's home. Then the call ended. When she redialed, the caller didn't answer. Based on the address, I was about 10 minutes away. I radioed in and requested backup. Another new officer named Chris chimed in and said he'd be on location in 5. Claire clicked on her radio, but hesitated for a few seconds over the static. Then she said the caller sounded like they were altering their voice in some way, possibly through digital means to make themselves sound like a child. She used the specific phrase, like a young girl. She concluded that officers should proceed with extreme caution. When I turned into the neighborhood, I saw that every single street lamp was out. The entire block had lost power. I followed my GPS to the end of the street where the house was. Chris's cruiser was already idling in front. The grass was knee-high. Overgrown bushes blocked out the windows. The roof was dented in several areas and had a ton of missing shingles. It looked completely abandoned. This sent off alarm bells in my head. I told Chris I'd take the lead. We followed a waterlogged path up to the door. When we reached the door, I rang the bell. Footsteps shuffled up to the door. Then they paused. Whoever was on the other side was completely still, just waiting. A feeling came over me that we were being watched. Slowly, my gaze drifted over to the peephole. As soon as I made eye contact, a distorted shape moved back. "If you're in there, we'd like to ask you a few questions." "Open up, please," I said. Then the lock started turning and the door creaked open, but only by a foot. A man peeked out of the crack. He looked like he was in his early 30s. He was overweight, balding, and wore thick-brimmed glasses. I took a single look into his eyes and sensed that he was hiding something. I informed him that we'd received a call from his address. The man acted confused. He apologized and told us it must have been a pocket dial. I asked him if it was a pocket dial. Then how could he explain the voice in the phone call? For a split second, the man averted his gaze, then said he didn't know anything about a voice. I asked him if there was anyone else in the house, and he said he lived alone. Then I told him that for safety reasons, we needed to have a look inside. "Not without a warrant," he said. 5 minutes later, the judge approved a telephonic warrant and emailed it. I showed the warrant to the man. He reluctantly pulled the door open, and I could see that his hands were visibly shaking. Putrid smell immediately hit me. I shined my light into the living room. It was absolutely disgusting. Piles of clothes and stacks of dirty dishes were spread across the carpet. Cockroaches were crawling all over them. Then I stepped toward the hallway. My foot struck something. I saw a pink Barbie doll playhouse. I asked the man if he had kids. He said no, but explained that sometimes his nieces came over. Chris and I exchanged a look. No mother in their right mind would allow children into this environment. I started my way down the hallway. Chris ordered the man to stay put. I peeked inside the first room. In the corner, the dark shape of a person was hunched over. I drew my weapon only to realize that it was a doll sagging its head down in a rocking chair. It was the largest one I'd ever seen, every bit as big as a person, and the man had dressed it in women's clothing. On the bed beside it, ladies' blouses, jeans, and lingerie were folded into neat piles. Meanwhile, the rest of the house was a pigsty. I reached the final door at the end of the hall. The man asked if I'd like to see the upstairs instead. I told him yes, but first I was going to see the basement. He became more agitated. I pushed the door open. A set of wooden steps descended into a pitch-black room. From deep inside the room, something rattled. I headed down the staircase. The rattling noise grew louder. Behind me, the man repeatedly begged us to stop looking around. Across the room there was another door. The noise was coming from there. I drew my weapon. I commanded whoever was inside to come out slowly. Whoever was inside stopped moving. I reached for the knob, grabbed on, and twisted. Then I swung the door open. After several agonizing moments, nothing came. I aimed my weapon right into the room. What I saw I can't go into detail on, but basically this is what happened. A man in his mid-40s was being held captive in that basement. He was a father of 3 and a respected member of the community. Months after he went missing, everyone, including his family, assumed he was dead. After 2 years in captivity, he finally got the chance to escape. Earlier in the night, the homeowner brought the victim's dinner down and made the mistake of leaving his phone behind. The victim managed to activate Siri and call 911. When I ordered him to come out, he froze in fear. Not because he couldn't obey my command, but because he didn't want me to use lethal force, thinking that he was a threat. We arrested the homeowner on the spot and took the victim to the hospital. But the most disturbing detail is how my dispatcher described the voice of the man who made the call. Why was he speaking like a child? The only explanation that makes sense is that this man was forced to speak in that young tone of voice for so long that even when he called the station, that's the only way he could communicate. And if he was forced to do that, what else inside that house was he forced to do? I've been a patrol officer for a little over 8 years now. This call happened in late October a few years back around 2:40 in the morning. Dispatch toned me out for a 911 hang-up. The caller had reported hearing a woman screaming from inside the house next door. I was only about 5 minutes away. When I pulled up, the street was dead silent. A light rain had started to fall. The house in question was a 2-story place with a small front porch. I noticed the front door was slightly cracked open. That immediately raised my guard. I asked for another unit, but at that time of night, the nearest backup was about 10 minutes out. I pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. Everything looked normal and neat. I moved toward the kitchen. There was a glass on the table with what looked like water still in it. I made a mental note of it, meaning that someone had been sitting there not long ago. I called out, "Police department," but no one answered. I moved down the hallway toward the staircase. As I stepped onto the first stair, I heard a sound from above, like a quick faint shuffle, like a foot dragging across carpet. I drew my weapon and continued up the stairs slowly. The upstairs hallway had 3 doors. As I reached the top, I heard it again, a soft movement. I pushed the open doorway wider. It was a bedroom. A lamp on the nightstand was knocked over onto the floor. That was the first thing that looked wrong. I checked the closet and under the bed. Nothing. The last door was the bathroom. As I reached for the handle, I noticed something on the carpet outside the door. A dark spot. I realized it was wet. It was blood. Not a huge amount, but enough to form a small pool. I called it out over the radio. I pushed the bathroom door open. The shower curtain was closed. There were streaks of blood on the tile floor leading toward the tub. I moved closer and yanked the curtain back. The tub was empty, but there was more blood near the drain. The blood looked as though someone had been standing there bleeding. I was alone in the house with fresh blood and no victim. That's when I heard a faint sound from below, like a floorboard creaking under weight from the first floor. I moved back toward the stairs. I descended slowly. When I reached the bottom, I noticed something I hadn't before. A door near the refrigerator that I'd assumed was a pantry was slightly ajar now. I was almost certain it had been closed earlier. I approached it and opened it wider. It was a narrow set of stairs leading down into a basement. I flicked the light switch, but it did nothing. I started down the stairs into complete darkness. As I stepped off the last stair, I saw a chair in the middle of the room, a metal folding chair, and the floor beneath it, a large pool of blood bigger than what I'd seen upstairs. The chair had zip ties attached to the armrests. They were cut. That's when my light hit movement in the far corner. A figure bolted behind a stack of boxes. I yelled for them to stop. They moved fast, heading toward a small window near the ceiling. I heard glass shatter. By the time I reached that corner, the window had broken and whoever it was had forced themselves through. I climbed out after them, cutting my hand on the glass. I could see a dark shape sprinting toward the alley, but I lost them once they turned the corner. Backup arrived minutes later, but we never found the person who ran. The house turned out to belong to a man who lived alone. He wasn't there. We found his wallet and his phone. There were signs he'd been restrained in that basement chair. The blood matched him, but not enough to confirm he died there. He was never found. The neighbor swore she heard a woman screaming, but we never identified any female connected to that address. I don't know if I interrupted something in progress or if I walked in after it was already over. The missing man's case is still technically open. A new family lives in that house now, but sometimes things happen in the most normal neighborhoods.